Λέγομαι Σταυρούλα Μιλιάκου. Υπηρέτησα το ελληνικό δημόσιο για 40 χρόνια, εκ των οποίων 37 στο Γενικό Λογιστήριο του Κράτους. Το 2015 ήμουν Γενική Διευθύντρια Προϋπολογισμού και Δημοσιονομικής Πολιτικής στο Γενικό Λογιστήριο του Κράτους. Καλημέρα σας. Έχουμε γυρίσματα, θυμόμαστε το 2015. Λίγες μέρες πριν από τις εκλογές, μια ομάδα στελεχών του ΣΥΡΙΖΑ είχε έρθει στο λογιστήριο κατόπιν εντολής του κ. Σταϊκούρα. Είχαν πλήρη εικόνα για την κατάσταση, που βέβαια ήταν λίγο πολύ γνωστή, δεν ήταν κανένα μυστικό. Εκείνη την ώρα χρειαζόμασταν ρευστό.
Ονομάζομαι Δημήτρης Μάρδας, είμαι καθηγητής τμήματος Οικονομικών Επιστημών του Αριστοτελείου Πανεπιστημίου Θεσσαλονίκης. Το 2015 είχα οριστεί ως αναπληρωτής Υπουργός Οικονομικών στο Γενικό Λογιστήριο του Κράτους.
Έρχεστε εδώ αμέσως μετά την ορκομοσία της κυβέρνησης και γίνεται η παράδοση παραλαβή εδώ ακριβώς στον χώρο.
Εδώ ακριβώς πίσω καθόμασταν όλοι μαζί.
Κύριε Μάρδα, κύριε Υπουργέ, παραλαμβάνετε το χαρτοφυλάκιό σας από τον κύριο Σταϊκούρα που ανέβασε τον πύχη ψηλά σε επίπεδο προσωπικής προσφοράς και συνεργασίας με τις υπηρεσίες. Εύχομαι κατά τη διάρκεια της θητείας σας στο Γενικό Λογιστήριο του Κράτους το πύχη να ανέβει ψηλότερα για το καλό της πατρίδας και για το καλό όλων μας. Καλώς ήρθατε και καλή δουλειά.
Παρέλαβα στο Ταμείο 1,6 δισεκατομμύρια. Και καταλαβαίνετε, 1,6 δισεκατομμύρια με 5,5 δισεκατομμύρια πληρωμές το μήνα δημιουργεί ένα πρώτο άγχος. Τα πράγματα ήταν αρκετά ζόρικα.
Είμαστε το πορτοφόλι του κράτους και δεν μπορεί να κινηθεί οτιδήποτε παρά μόνο μετά την έγκρισή μας. Μπορούμε να έχουμε μια θεαματική συμβολή στον εξυγχρονισμό του κράτους.
Το πρώτο πράγμα που βλέπετε είναι το C-table.
Είναι το πρώτο πράγμα που πρέπει να βλέπει κάθε υπουργός που μπαίνει εδώ μέσα. Είναι το τι μπαίνει στο ταμείο, το τι βγαίνει στο ταμείο, το τι χρωστάμε σε ομόλογα, το τι χρωστάμε σε έντοκα γραμμάτια του δημοσίου. Τα πάντα. Ήρθε ο γραμματέας, με ενημέρωσε προφορικά και το απόγευμα ήρθε το C-table και είδαμε.
Τι είδατε?
Είδαμε ότι 24 του μηνός κοκκινίζει και πήρε και έγραψε ένα SOS επάνω. Το έχω γραμμένο έτσι. Ήταν κάπου 440 εκατομμύρια. Άρα αυτό το 440 έλλειμμα έπρεπε να εξαφανιστεί και να γίνει πλεόνασμα.
Πώς νιώθετε όταν βλέπατε το κόκκινο το C-table?
Ήταν τρόμος, που σημαίνει ότι δεν μπορούσα να πληρώσω μισθούς ή συντάξεις, ή και τα δύο. Και αυτό καταλαβαίνετε ότι στην πραγματικότητα ήταν μια δήλωση χρεοκοπίας της χώρας. Με ό,τι μπορεί να συνεπάγεται, όταν θα πήγαινε ο μισθωτός του ταξιούχου στο ATM να πάρει το μισθό του και έβλεπε κενό, καταλαβαίνετε ότι αυτό θα δημιουργούσε μια κατάσταση πανικού.
Είμαι η Ελένη Βαρβιτσιώτη.
Και είμαι η Βικτωρία Δενδρινού.
Το 2015 ήμασταν ανταποκρίτριες στις Βρυξέλλες.
Εκεί που όλα κρίθηκαν.
Σήμερα επιστρέφουμε
Για να καταλάβουμε τι πραγματικά συνέβη.
Κυνηγήσαμε τις πληροφορίες.
Μιλήσαμε με τους πρωταγωνιστές.
Καταγράψαμε το παρασκήνιο.
Ήταν η πιο δραματική στιγμή στην ιστορία της Ευρωζώνης.
Πόσο κοντά φτάσαμε στην καταστροφή?
Ευλογητός ο Θεός ημών πάντοτε νυν και αεί και εις τους αιώνας των αιώνων.
In October 2009, after national elections in Greece, a new government came in, a new finance minister came in, and he walked into the room, sat down, and said, "Good morning, my name is George Papakonstantino, and I'm here to present the economic policy program of the new government. But first of all, I've got to tell you, there's bad news. There's a problem." So we sat up, and he proceeded to tell us what the incoming government had found in the fiscal accounts of the Greek state. And that made us sit up even more, even though the final tally, which turned out to be, if I remember correctly, 15.6% deficit of GDP, was not known at that stage.
Δυστυχώς το πρώτο εννιάμηνο προκύπτει ότι το έλλειμμα είναι της τάξης του 10%. Εάν συνυπολογίσει κανείς τη δυναμική όπως έχει διαμορφωθεί και το τι μέλη γενέστε τους επόμενους τους μήνες, θα μπορούσε κανείς να πιθανολογήσει με σχετική βεβαιότητα ότι το έλλειμμα, δυστυχώς, το ξαναλέω, θα αγγίξει αν δεν ξεπεράσει τα επίπεδα του 12%.
Αυτά. Από εκεί πέρα, από ό,τι καταλαβαίνετε, δεν θα
Καμία.
It was a shock because the magnitude as such was shocking for other governments, for the markets, but it also showed that the Greek government had not been honest, and that's when trust begins to crumble.
I had been covering the war in Afghanistan and Iraq for about 8 years. And then Europe blew up, and the Financial Times came to me and said, hey, how would you like to be our Brussels bureau chief on what I thought was the biggest European economic story that, frankly, the world had ever seen.
How big of a sin was that from a 3% deficit, it was actually a 15%?
I mean, huge sin. But in any other time, would have been probably a week or two to just say, we will either restructure your debt or we'll have a payment plan for you. But the fact it happened at this time was the perfect storm.
We want to know what has happened, why has happened, and I will come back as soon as possible with proposals to reinforce, if needed, the instruments in the hands of Eurostat to avoid the repetition of these kind of situations.
I have to say that I'm deeply impressed by the divergence between the old and the new figures. It happened several times in the past. If it happens once more in the future, we are putting at risk the credibility of all the figures and all the framework we are moving in. The game is over. We need serious statistics.
This was seen as the major fault of Greece. And it was a fault. It was a really big mistake to have other people considering that in Greece, more or less, everything is okay. Greece, after having acknowledged that they were leading others in error, were no longer trust. That was the main problem. And so everyone could say about Greece whatever he wanted to say. I remember in the Eurogroup meetings that some finance ministers were proposing to sell the Acropolis in order to get money out of this.
Do you remember who said it?
Yes.
Will you tell us?
No. Because she, which is an indication, doesn't want to be remembered.
Okay. And how did you react when you heard the minister saying you should sell the Acropolis? How did you react as president?
Keep your mouth. Keep your mouth. Shut up. I think that I made a major mistake. That was that I was not confronting with his responsibilities the Greek government of Karamanlis, because I was believing him in a naive way. And that's the only real mistake I have made.
You find yourself in double digit all of a sudden, and one discovers that they were cheating. So this tainted the whole discussion, and the moral hazard paradigm set in. Trust goes away on a horseback and come back on foot.
The situation in the 90s was that the European Commission proposed several times to the EU member states to give Eurostat the power to check data, but the member states didn't agree, including Germany and France, for instance. They thought that was too much interference into their own sovereignty.
I was amongst those who blocked that as a finance minister. I said, well, the Commission is putting its nose in everything in our countries, but not in our figures. Please don't do that. That was a mistake.
Όταν ξεκίνησε η διαδικασία των μνημονίων, ένα πρώτο ερώτημα που τέθηκε στο ελληνικό κράτος ήταν πόσα το ελληνικό δημόσιο χρωστάει στους ιδιώτες. Δεν ήταν γνωστό. Μετά από αυτό ανοίξαν ντουλάπες, βγήκαν σκελετοί, βγήκαν τιμολόγια. Ήταν επώδυνο, αλλά μετά από αυτό άρχισε σιγά σιγά να οργανώνεται και να μπορούμε να έχουμε μια τέτοια εικόνα. Νομίζω ότι είχαμε φτάσει σε ένα αρκετά καλό επίπεδο το 2014 στο να μπορούμε να έχουμε μία εικόνα του τι συμβαίνει στην δημόσια διαχείριση και πολύ σημαντικό και στα ταμειακά διαθέσιμα.
Ήταν ξεκάθαρο στη διαπραγματευτική ομάδα ότι τα διαθέσιμα είναι ελάχιστα.
Ναι. Ήταν ότι είμαστε σε οριακή κατάσταση από τη δεύτερη μέρα. Τα ταμειακά διαθέσιμα 2 μέρες μετά τις εκλογές είναι ήδη στο κόκκινο. Προφανώς θα έπρεπε να βρεθεί μια άμεση λύση για να πληρωθούν μισθοί και συντάξεις και να μην υπάρξει στάση πληρωμών του ελληνικού δημοσίου προς συνταξιούχους και δημοσίους υπαλλήλους τον πρώτο μήνα της διακυβέρνησής μας.
The program is expiring and how worried were you about the reserves of the country?
I was worried that I didn't have a clue. We didn't know. Nobody knew. Not even the Greeks knew.
Η κυβέρνηση κοινωνικής σωτηρίας που ανέδειξε με την ψήφο του ο ελληνικός λαός έχει μπροστά της ένα εξαιρετικά δύσκολο έργο.
There was a constant concern. And there had to be a constant concern because the economy was tanking. If you're tanking, you take in less tax. You have to pay out more in unemployment insurance. Nobody's lending you any money. You have to repay debt. So, of course, you get more worried by the day simply because the debts keep piling up and piling up and piling up.
When he came to Brussels, I wanted to show to the public that this was not a meeting between enemies. During that first meeting where I took him by my hand, he told me, you have to know, I have been elected by 36% of the Greeks, and this has to be taken seriously on board by the European Union. And I remember that I told him, that's not impressing me. If I had had in my life the program you had before the general elections in Greece, I would have been voted in by 80%. So 36% on the basis of that program is a very weak result.
I'm Martin Selmayr, and I was the Chief of Staff of Jean-Claude Juncker, President of the European Commission in 2015.
So while the two of them were having a private meeting, you were being introduced to the Greek team as well.
Yes.
What was your first impression?
Well, it was one of the most interesting experiences in my life. We had, of course, prepared ourselves, my team and I. We are sitting in the protocol room outside the office of President Juncker, and I had the new Greek team there. And we discussed this before with Juncker. I said, we have to be always very, very disciplined. We have to be very patient. They are new. They come from a different ideological background. To sit together with us, the Commission, is probably for them as strange as it is for us. So let's work with them in the best possible way. But it was a quite interesting experience. And my personal impression was they're coming right like the revolutionaries from the barricades. They came into the room. They were sitting with the shirts a bit open and saying, where's the money? Where's the money now?
To be able to understand Greece, one has to have the same sense of humor than the one you have.
True.
I had good relations with Tsipras on a personal.
What did you think of him? How would you describe him?
Yeah, that's difficult to say. I still have a huge volume of personal sympathy for Alexis. So I liked him as a man. I had the impression that he was defending the dignity of the Greek people, and I was very sensitive to this dimension of his behavior, because the dignity of the Greek people has been treated in the baddest way possible.
I remember very clearly him saying to me, "Are you confused? I'm a radical Marxist. We'll be dancing in the streets."
What was your main takeaway?
We're headed for the cliff.
The US administration in European politics is something which has been considerably swept under the carpet in all analysis. And it was huge. And especially in the case of the Greek program, it was enormous.
Good afternoon, everybody. TGIF.
What's the White House's reaction to the new government's statement today that it will not cooperate with the IMF and European lenders about extending its aid package?
The president telephoned Prime Minister Tsipras earlier this week because the United States for a number of years now has been working closely with the EU and the Greeks to try to resolve these differences and get Greece and Europe and the global economy back on a path toward growth and prosperity, because that ultimately is going to be in the best interests of the U.S. economy.
Jack has the distinction of having worked and succeeded in some of the toughest jobs in Washington and the private sector.
We thought it was very unhelpful if a country in the Eurozone, if Greece were to collapse. And we thought that it was not good for economic reasons. We also thought it was not good for geopolitical strategic reasons. You know, Greece plays a crucial role in the security of Europe. It's in a sensitive location geographically, and we had a history of deep, close ties with Greece.
My job was Deputy Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Treasury for Europe and Eurasia. I was focused on Ukraine and Greece almost exclusively.
What was your briefing? What would you tell Secretary Liu about what was coming?
That if Syriza is elected, they will reject the entirety of the bailout program. And Greece will soon face a credit crunch, a banking collapse, a run on the economy. And we will soon be in a conversation around how to maintain the euro as a single currency.
Look, we were very worried. The reputation of Syriza was that it was a very radical party. It had earned that reputation through its rhetoric, so it wasn't as if you looked at what the Syriza proposals and language was and were comforted by it. So we frankly didn't know what to expect. It was the team that he built around him, including his finance minister, were somewhat challenging to engage with.
Εσείς τι προσδοκούσατε από τους Αμερικάνους?
Μια βελτίωση του κλίματος, μια εικόνα για την Ελλάδα η οποία θα αρχίσει να διορθώνει αυτό που είχε κατησχύσει εκείνο τον καιρό, ότι είναι ανήμπορη για τα πάντα οικονομικά. Και νομίζω ότι είχαμε μια συμβουλή από εκείνη τη μεριά.
So it was agreed, let's send somebody who's relatively harmless, i.e. me. Because, if you send the Secretary of the Treasury or, someone from the White House, there's a danger of being used, quite frankly, as a source of bargaining power at a moment when the new government hadn't really established any credibility. So I went back with my team to engage with Minister Varoufakis and others.
How was your meeting with him?
Memorable. He was exactly in person as he was on TV. First of all, highly articulate, charismatic, some would say brilliant, but also clearly theatrical. I remember saying at some point, let's play this out, let's connect the dots. If Greece defaults and you leave the euro, what's your plan? And I remember very clearly him saying to me, are you confused? I'm a radical Marxist. We'll be dancing in the streets.
What was your main takeaway?
We're headed for the cliff.
What did you think of his strategy?
Reckless.
What did you think was the strategy?
I think was playing a bank shot, as we say here, on hinting at the possibility that Greece could drift outside of the US and Western strategic orbit towards our rivals. That was a profound misjudgment on his part.
You have a new finance minister, Mr. Varoufakis, that takes over. Can you describe in a few words how you thought of him, how you saw him?
I met him after the election in Paris. We came there without a tie and in blue jeans. That was his usual suit, but that is also mine when I'm out of office. And so we had a very good conversation. It's no secret that when I was a politician, I was from the left, center-left, not the same left as Tsipras, but obviously the left. And I tried to explain to him how things worked and what we could do realistically.
What did you tell him?
Try to find compromise with the Eurogroup. Try to understand that we are not your enemies. Try to understand that we need to find a solution together in order to get to the right point that we want to go to, which is Greece out of program, Greece with reforms, but also Greece with social respect.
Do I believe that Greece, as we are now, should be taking another tranche of loans? No. I'm just coming out of an exquisite meeting with my Italian counterpart, Mr. Padoan. Είμαι αισιόδοξος, όπως είναι και οι συνάδελφοί μου.
Varoufakis quite early, I think even before the first Eurogroup, went on a European tour. And he upset basically everyone.
Είναι τα μόνα που γάμισα που μου μείνανε μετά από τόσες μέρες ταξιδιών.
Πιο μέσα.
He went to Italy, came out of the Ministry of Finance there and said, well, the guys in there told me that their debt is unsustainable also. So the Italians were furious.
Μπορείτε να μας περιγράψετε λίγο το Μάριο Ντράγκη?
Πολύ ικανός τεχνοκράτης, βοήθησε την Ελλάδα σε απίστευτο βαθμό και μετέτρεψε την Ευρωπαϊκή Κεντρική Τράπεζα σε μια σύγχρονη κεντρική τράπεζα με σύγχρονα εργαλεία. Καταρχήν, το whatever it takes ήταν μια δική του πρωτοβουλία.
The ECB is ready to do whatever it takes to preserve the euro. And believe me, it will be enough.
Ο Γιάννης Βαρουφάκης πάει στην Ευρωπαϊκή Κεντρική Τράπεζα και συναντιέται πρώτη φορά με τον Μάριο Ντράγκη. Εσείς έχετε κάποια ενημέρωση από αυτή την επίσκεψη?
Βεβαίως. Καταρχήν, με ρώτησε ο Μάριο Ντράγκη αν θέλω να παρευρεθώ. Λέω, ο Υπουργός Οικονομικών ζήτησε να παρευρεθώ. Μου λέει όχι. Αν θυμάμαι καλά, μου είπε ότι δεν θέλει να παρευρεθείς. Λέω, εντάξει τότε. Μου λέει, θα σε ενημερώσουμε το απόγευμα. Είχαμε διοικητικό συμβούλιο. Μου είπε το απόγευμα ότι πήγε τραγικά.
We had a very fruitful discussion and exchange concerning the constraints, the rules, the regulations.
Η χημεία μεταξύ Ντράγκη και Βαρουφάκη δεν ήταν καλή, διότι ο Βαρουφάκης δημοσίως έλεγε πολύ αρνητικά λόγια για τον Ντράγκη και για την Ευρωπαϊκή Κεντρική Τράπεζα, αλλά για μένα δεν το κουβεντιάζω. Επαναλάμβανε δημόσια ότι η Ελλάδα είναι μια χρεοκοπημένη χώρα και ο Ντράγκη του έλεγε, μα αν είναι χρεοκοπημένη χώρα, πώς θα σας δανείσουμε χρήματα, πώς θα δανείσει η Ευρωπαϊκή Κεντρική Τράπεζα τις ελληνικές τράπεζες που η χώρα πάνω στις οποίες λειτουργούν είναι χρεοκοπημένη.
I'm moving on to Berlin, where I'm extremely eager to meet with not just a finance minister, but with an intellectual force behind the project of European Union and Monetary Union, Dr. Schäuble.
Well, Wolfgang Schäuble has been one of the most important German politicians because what few people know, it was Wolfgang Schäuble who negotiated the reunification treaty with the former GDR. So he's basically the architect of, if you want, of German unification. So that is his big legacy in Germany.
He was a genuine giant of European politics. Everyone thought he would be prime minister, chancellor at some point. He was shot and almost killed by an attempted assassin. He also grew up on the borders of Germany and France. So from growing up in that time, knowing what the post-war generation had dealt with, very different, frankly, from Angela Merkel. Angela Merkel, who was younger than him, also grew up in East Germany, so didn't quite experience the post-war period the way that Schäuble did. He believed very strongly as a result of his personal life story about the importance of the European project. And it offended him when people did not take it that seriously.
I'm Thomas Steffen. In 2015, I served as the State Secretary in the German Ministry of Finance. In my view, it was really a dream of Wolfgang Schäuble to have one currency for the whole European Union. That is why he reached out to many member states not being a member of the Eurogroup to join the Eurogroup as early as possible. It was crystal clear for him that being a member of the Eurogroup puts a lot of responsibility with you.
He was not only influential because of his stature and his standing as a politician in Germany. But you have to remember the singular place Germany plays in the Eurozone. It is Europe's largest economy, by a lot.
If Austria says no to something and the others say yes, in the end, the Austrians will agree. If Germany says no to something and sticks with its no, it's not going to happen.
Καταρχάς δεν ήταν οικονομολόγος, ήταν δικηγόρος. Είχε πολύ σαφή άποψη για πού θέλει να πάει η Ευρώπη. Η δυσκολία μας ήταν να καταλάβουμε πού ήταν το κέντρο βάρος της εξουσίας στην Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση. Όταν είμαι στο Eurogroup, νομίζω μπορώ να το απαντήσω τώρα το ερώτημα, ήταν ο Schäuble.
I would say to him, you have to remember that if you become the reason that people can't survive in Greece, that's going to have consequences just like it did in Germany.
Ich habe dieser Tage meinem Freund Jack Lew angeboten, dass wir Puerto Rico in die Eurozone übernehmen könnten, wenn die USA Griechenland in die Dollarunion übernehmen würden. Er fand es einen Scherz.
Everybody knows he was in favor of Brexit, certainly in 2015, perhaps even in 2012.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having us. It's a great honor. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
So if somebody misbehaves, I, as a good European, Wolfgang Schäuble, would say, misbehavior cannot be tolerated because it hurts us all. And if somebody misbehaves drastically, well, that person should leave the family.
Right. Do they want a handshake as well? No. No handshake. Not with this. Absolutely not. Not with this left wing.
Someone once said to me, he believes in Europe so much that he needs Greece to be out because he was tired of it tearing the Eurozone together. Someone described to me as like gangrene in your leg. You need to cut off the leg to make the rest of the body healthy. I think he misunderstood the domino effect that would have. Oh, you're going to lose Greece, who's next? But to him, it was a pro-European stance to say, I'm tired of the Greeks. They're causing too much problem. The only way we can heal ourselves is to cut off the knee. And that's the way it was beginning to play out after Syriza came into office.
Ja, meine Damen und Herren, ich hatte heute die Freude, meinen neuen griechischen Amtskollegen Yannis Varoufakis zu begrüßen und ein bisschen kennenzulernen. Wir haben uns lange intensiv unterhalten, nicht in völliger Übereinstimmung, aber das wäre ja auch nicht überzeugend gewesen. Also soll ich jetzt sagen, we agree to disagree.
As Dr. Schäuble said, we didn't reach an agreement. It was never on the cards that we would. We didn't even agree to disagree from where I'm standing.
I felt at that time a little bit of disappointing because politicians, whenever they meet, they should be able to find some kind of common ground. But at that time, obviously, that was not the case.
And again, you talked about Greek fatigue, particularly for Schäuble. Do I have to deal with this guy? Really? Is this the guy we rely on to save the Eurozone? Screw it, cut the leg off, let the rest of us go on and tighten up who we are as a Eurozone single currency union and let Greek go.
The Greek exit, is it on the table or not?
Of course not. Of course.
But can you say something about this?
I'm confident we're going to have a very constructive meeting today. Thank you.
I will express my hope that they stick to the reform path. They have returned to growth last year, reached a primary surplus, and it is crucial for Greece to maintain on that path. How and under what conditions, that will be for discussion today.
Aber wenn wir aus dem Programm rausgehen, dann sind wir ganz gespannt, was Griechenland für Vorstellungen hat. Das muss von diesem Plan bleiben. Jedes Land ist völlig frei zu tun, was es will, aber wir haben dieses Programm und dieses Programm wird entweder ordentlich zu Ende gebracht oder wir haben kein Programm.
There's a big room, there are all the other finance ministers, there's the Commission, the ECB, the ESM, and they all look at the new person and try to understand. So it's not an easy situation.
Ήταν μια πρώτη εμφάνιση πολύ διαφορετική από αυτές που συνήθως καταγράφονταν στο Eurogroup.
So he came in and he immediately basically lectured the Eurogroup that we didn't understand what was actually happening, the economics of it. So the whole attitude was very negative on both sides. He was very negative towards the Eurogroup and not trying to establish any kind of relation.
Το πρώτο πράγμα που λέχθηκε είναι ότι η Ελλάδα δεν χρειάζεται πρόγραμμα. Και πολύ σύντομα, ίσως με την επόμενη συνεδρία, η Ελλάδα δεν θα είναι στην ατζέντα του Eurogroup.
He said, of course, we must have new loans because we have acute liquidity issues. And people were just rolling their eyes. You just said, no more lending. And half an hour later, you ask for new loans. And by the way, you don't accept any conditions.
Οπότε όταν σου λέει ότι κοιτάξτε δεν θέλουμε, δεν θα είμαστε σε πρόγραμμα, τι καταλαβαίνεις? Θα επανακτήσεις από εβδομάδα στην πρόσβαση στις αγορές? Ποιο ήταν ακριβώς το πλάνο? Κανείς δεν κατάλαβε.
At this stage, it was 2015. Greece had been in a program for 5 years. All of the ministers, or many of the ministers, and certainly many of the officials around the table, this was the third time around we were having this conversation on a financial assistance program for Greece. It was as if nothing had happened before 2015, and that all of the problems and all of the fault and all of the responsibility for fixing it lay with the creditors.
Είχε υποτιμήσει το πώς δουλεύει το Eurogroup.
Δεν είμαι σίγουρος καν ότι ήξερε πώς δουλεύει το Eurogroup και αυτό νομίζω ότι το συμμεριζόμασταν όλοι. Δηλαδή όλοι ακριβώς δεν είχαμε καταλάβει πού είναι το κέντρο της εξουσίας και πού πρέπει να διαπραγματευτείς. Είπε ο Γιάννης Βαρουφάκης ότι αντιμετωπίζουμε μια ανθρωπιστική κρίση και άρα πρέπει να αλλάξει και τουλάχιστον 6-7 υπουργοί γελάσανε. Αυτό, εκτός από τη χυδαιότητα της αντίδρασης, μου δημιούργησε ότι έχουμε πολύ δύσκολο έργο.
I think there was a reluctance in the Eurogroup to address the social or humanitarian crisis because in the end, the Greek budget still would have to be sorted out. There was quite a large group that came from countries that in GDP per capita were poorer than Greece. So the Baltics, Slovenia, Slovakia, they were countries extremely critical on the new Greek government.
If you tell me that you cannot lower pension payments to pensioners, even though your pension payments are twice as much as my pensioner in Latvia gets, how the hell do I do that? How can I go back home and explain to my population that we're helping out a country which is much richer, despite all of its problems, much richer than our country?
There were countries like Spain or Ireland which had gone through a very difficult financial assistance plans, implemented very difficult policies and had or were coming out of the other side. And they felt it would be extremely difficult to explain to their electorates why should Greece get a free pass, whereas they had to implement policies which were very difficult for their population.
There are at least 10 different overlapping groupings of countries, which shows how very complex these issues were, keeping everybody so together that you could continue to provide finance for a Greek economy that otherwise nobody on the whole globe wanted to finance.
came to an agreement, which was an agreement on process. We would continue talking. There would be some room to change the conditions in the program. And then Varoufakis said, I need to call Athens. So, okay, this can happen. It's not regular, but it can happen. The meeting was adjourned. All the ministers sat around the table. And he didn't actually leave the room to make the call to Athens. He sat in the room, in the presence of all his colleagues and staff, and talked to whom I presume was the Prime Minister in Athens. And this went on for more than half an hour, and people just lost their patience. The first one who left was the Minister of Austria. Schäuble left, de Guindos left, the Spanish minister. People were just walking out.
Give me a sense of your optimism, if any at all.
Well, like it was today, it went from left to right and up and down. So it's hard to take an average of it, but say that it will be continue to be a very difficult discussion.
So I walked up to him. He was still on the phone, and I said, "Look, you can put the phone down. There is no deal because people have just left, and I cannot take a decision." That didn't seem to bother him at all. He just continued his phone call. And close to an hour, he put the phone down and said, "No, we cannot agree, there's no deal."
Σήμερα είχα τη χαρά να βιώσω το πρώτο Eurogroup εδώ στις Βρυξέλλες. Ήταν μια πολύ ενδιαφέρουσα ανταλλαγή απόψεων, έντονος διάλογος, γίναν συζητήσεις από πολλές μεριές. Μας τέθηκε το θέμα ότι υπάρχει μια δανειακή συμφωνία και πρέπει να την επεκτείνουμε. Εμείς εξηγήσαμε ότι εκλεγήκαμε με στόχο την αμφισβήτηση της λογικής αυτού του προγράμματος. Στο ερώτημα αν υπήρξαν σημεία σύμπτωσης, πολλά και με πολλούς και σε κάποια με όλους. Δεν πρόκειται να αναφερθώ σε συγκεκριμένα σημεία.
Ποια είναι τα ρίσκα για το ελληνικό τραπεζικό σύστημα?
Δεν θέλω να μιλήσω υποθετικά, θα μου επιτρέψετε. Ήρθαμε εδώ για να βρούμε λύση. Η μη λύση δεν είναι στο πλαίσιο της σκέψης μας.
The guy we saw in the Eurogroup was terrible. He thought that he himself could convince all the Eurogroup countries
17.
that he was right.
Της Γερμανίας υπάρχει λύση με συμπεριφορά της Γερμανίας. Έφυγε μισή ώρα πριν από εσάς.
Λοιπόν, σας χαιρετώ. Ευχαριστώ πολύ.
We ended in chaos. No deal, nothing to communicate to the outside world.
Και η υπόθεση πάει για ναυάγιο, κανονικό ναυάγιο.
It was really one of the few Eurozone meetings that we ended in chaos. No deal, nothing to communicate to the outside world. Very bad message. The follow-up of that was someone made the clever remark that the day after, later in the afternoon, there would be a European Council. So all the government leaders were coming to Brussels. And so Prime Minister Tsipras will be in Brussels.
What does it make you optimistic that you will reach compromise with your partners?
I'm very confident that altogether we can find a mutually viable solution in order to heal the wounds of austerity, to tackle humanitarian crisis across European Union, and to bring Europe back to the road of growth and social cohesion.
I said, try and get the staff of the Prime Minister on the phone and see whether we can have a meeting with Prime Minister Tsipras. Because we're definitely not getting anywhere with Varoufakis. And that's what happened. And the next morning, I met Prime Minister Tsipras in his hotel room in Brussels. So I said, the only thing we can do is to put out a statement that we have been in touch, we had constructive talks, and that we will continue the talks to talk about amendments to the program, etc., which would hopefully reinstall some confidence in the outside world.
Juncker made very clear that whatever happens, Greece will continue to need support of the Euro member states, financial supports, loans and support. The most important thing technically, and you need to understand this, Alexis, you need to ask for an extension. And this is a very short thing. You just have to send, I want hereby request an extension of the program. This gives us the time to negotiate something, and I will help you that is more acceptable to you and will also work if we do an effort together with the other Euro area countries.
Yesterday, as you know, we received a request letter from the Greek authorities for an extension of the agreement, the MFFA, for 4 months.
What it did do was buy time to continue with negotiations to hopefully come to a new understanding or agreement.
In addition, the Greek authorities have reiterated today their unequivocal commitment to honor their financial obligations to all their creditors fully and timely.
What do you bring home to the Green people?
A great success. And for the Europeans. We did well today.
Well, I think first of all, the terms under which this extension was done were probably understood differently in the Eurogroup and in Brussels than in Athens.
Επέκταση της Δανειακής Σύμβασης του Δευτέρου Μνημονίου κατά 1 τετράμινο, συν τους όρους του Δευτέρου Μνημονίου που δεν είχε εκπληρώσει η κυβέρνηση Σαμαρά-Βενιζέλου, συν και πρόσθετους όρους.
Τι σκεφτήκατε?
Τι σκέφτηκα, ότι εδώ η υπόθεση πάει για ναυάγιο, κανονικό ναυάγιο. Υπέγραψε επέκταση Δανειακής Σύμβασης χωρίς δάνειο.
Χωρίς να πάρει λεφτά, λέτε.
Ναι, δεν εξασφάλισε δάνεια και ξύναμε επί τετράμινο τον πάτο του δημοσίου προκειμένου να ανταποκρινόμαστε στις στοχοχρεωτικές δόσεις.
Ήδη ήμασταν εκτός αγορών γιατί θεωρούμασταν στην πραγματικότητα μια υποψήφια προς χρεοκοπία χώρα. Εάν λοιπόν δεν μπορούσαμε να ανταποκριθούμε στις υποχρεώσεις μας και να πληρώσουμε τις υποχρεώσεις μας ό,τι αφορά το δανεισμό μας, καταλαβαίνετε ότι και αυτό ήταν μια επίσημη δήλωση χρεοκοπίας πια.
Εκείνο που τους έλεγα είναι ότι πρέπει να τελειώσουν τις διαπραγματεύσεις το ταχύτερο δυνατό και τους είχα πει, βέβαια αυτό προβλεπόταν κιόλας, ότι μέχρι τέλη Απριλίου πρέπει να τελειώσουμε. Γιατί τα πράγματα στο ταμείο ήταν πάρα πολύ δύσκολα.
Όπως και πολλές άλλες ώρες ήταν ένας τρόμος. Ήταν ένας δρόμος γιατί πολλές φορές δεν ένιωθα ότι υπήρχε κατανόηση από τους πολιτικούς μου προϊσταμένους του μεγέθους του προβλήματος. Και αυτό ήταν το πιο σημαντικό όλων. Ότι ένιωθες μόνος σου και ένιωθες ότι έπρεπε να βρεις εσύ τη λύση.
I had the very clear impression that the counterparts on the Greek side simply hadn't read the MOU.
Did Putin communicate with you that Tsipras came and asked for some aid?
Yeah, he did.
And what did you tell him?
Don't
did he
do
ask
that.
you?
No, we are able to solve the problem by ourselves.
After one of our lengthy meetings, at 2 a.m. came to me and said, we have to stop discussing all of this fruitless nonsense, because in the end, we're gonna do nothing and you're gonna give us the money anyway. And I looked at him and I said, look me in the eyes, you're gonna go bankrupt.